Hey YouTube, how's it going? So I know this video is a little late, a little late. I should have probably released this video on Veterans Day, but better late than never, right? Más vale tarde, tarde que nunca. But I really wanted to sort of share something with you guys. Low key, sort of a piece of Black history, right? Um, and it's pretty much about my grandfather. To make a long story short, my grandfather was one of the very first Black Marines, um, and he served during World War II, right? And prior to World War II, Black men were not allowed to be in the Marines. I'm not quite sure why that is, but they weren't allowed to. Um, so once the draft happened, um, they started allowing the draft for World War II happened. They started allowing, I believe, Black men to enter the Marines, and my grandfather was one of the first to do it. I don't think he was the very first, but definitely one of the first, though, right? And the local newspaper actually did a story about my grandfather and his unit as well. And I believe the local newspaper from his hometown did a story too. Here's a cutout of the story. Let's see. All right, here's a photo, right? You see. All right, so guess which one is my grandfather? All right, guess which one? All right, yeah, that guy right here, right here, right here. I'm joking. My grandfather's in the middle, right in the middle. Um, but yeah, so as I said, my grandfather was, one of the very first Black Marines, and our local newspaper did a story, and this story is actually from May 28th, 2012. All right, yeah, it's a little old there. I probably should have did this video a long time ago. But as I said, más vale tarde que nunca. Better late than never. All right. Um, So I'll read a caption and then I'll read the news story. I actually haven't read this news story. I just always had the paper or the news clipping of it, but I never actually read the story. So this would be new for me too. Um, although I have attended events that like his unit sort of has events, and I've attended a few of them, like these sort of like dinners, about 2 or 3 of them. And I actually met a celebrity there. I met the father from Good Times, John Amos there, and as well, there's other folks there too. I think there's like an ambassador from Albania there from at one point or another too. But I'll read the caption first, and then I'll read the article. All right, so here again, the photo, and there's a caption under the photo, and I'll read that. Oh yeah, and also here's a photo of my grandfather when he was younger. Right, right there. There you go. All right, so the caption under the photo is John R. Hill Jr., John B. Brown Sr., and Theodore R. Britton Jr. were among the original Montford Point Marines, African Americans who integrated the Corps in the 40s. As better known military units were recognized, the Montford Pointers were overlooked until now. So the title, or I guess, let's see. Here we go. These men are pioneers. They help break marine color barrier. All right. Congressional Medal to honor, recognize Montford Pointers by Gracie Bond Staples. All right. So here's the article. I'll try to get through it quickly. In the decades since World War II ended, they've never once looked back on their service in the U.S. Marine Corps with bitterness. And now, the men who broke the color barrier in the last branch of the military to admit blacks will soon be rewarded one of the nation's highest honors. As they think back on their service as Montford Point Marines with pride, not sure what to make of the years it has taken to get to this point. Theodore R. Britton Jr., John R. Hill Jr., and John B. Brown Sr. agree it is an honor long overdue. Britton, Hill, and Brown are among a few hundred surviving members of the 20,000 men who served as Montford Pointers, including 10 living in Metro where I live. Unlike better-known military units that helped end racial segregation, such as the Tuskegee Airmen of the U.S. Army Air Force and the Army Buffalo Soldiers, the Montford Point Marines had been overlooked. And by the way, I actually have a great uncle who was or is a Tuskegee Airman. By the way, I don't really have much information. I don't really have any like an article to read or anything. But yeah, I believe he is my paternal grandmother's brother. Okay. So yeah, there you go. But let's see. And also, my father is a Marines too. Where I'm at. All right. But last summer, General James F. Amos, commander of the Marine Corps, announced plans to highlight their service to the Corps. And in November, President Barack Obama signed legislation awarding them the Congressional Gold Medal, putting them in the company of Winston Churchill and Rosa Parks. On June 27, they will be awarded bronze replicas of the gold medal at a ceremony in Washington. And so here they sit in a first-floor apartment in downtown, eager to relive memories that won't fade, to bear witness, just as the Tuskegee Airmen and the Buffalo Soldiers have done before them. They were still in school in 1941 when President Franklin D. Roosevelt banned race-based exclusion from the military, thus opening the door for them and other blacks to join the Marines. What they hadn't counted on, the men said, was how quickly the Corps adopted a policy of racial segregation. Indeed, the next year, a separate training camp for blacks was built in Montford Point, about 5 miles from all-white Camp Lejeune near Jacksonville, North Carolina. Britton, 86, volunteered for the Corps in 1944 during his senior year in high school. "Quote unquote, I had a pioneer spirit," he said. "We were so gung-ho and patriotic. We weren't concerned at all about what we were going to do. We just wanted to get in there and fight." The men took buses and trains to North Carolina from every corner of the country, only to discover that there would be no fighting for African Americans, at least not initially. They delivered ammunition, and other supplies to combat troops and later evacuated the wounded from the front lines. Quote unquote. We didn't know what we were getting into, Brown said, when he learned Black Marines were not permitted to engage in combat. Quote unquote, I wanted to get out and go back home, he said, but that wasn't near possible. Eventually, Britain said some went into combat. Uh, some went into combat as reinforcements to white Marines in Guam and Saipan, earning commendations for their bravery from General Alexander Vandergrift, the Marines' first World War II hero. Britain would go on to spend 2 years in the South Pacific, where he served until May 1946. Brown was assigned to the all-black 52nd Defense Battalion and in August 1944 headed to the Russell Islands in the South Pacific with the 29th Depot Company, and then on to Korea after spending time at Camp Pendleton. Hill went to Korea where he saw action at Chosin Reservoir, one of the Marine Corps' greatest battles. Although each of them felt the sting of segregation, their experiences were as unique as their personalities. Brenton said he never felt overt discrimination, but was disheartened by the stories he read, including those of blacks who were unfairly flunked in officer candidate school. But Brown said he didn't know what real discrimination was until he arrived at Montford Point. My granddad. Let's see. And it continues up here. In 1943, he arrived. All right. So, quote unquote, when I got to North Carolina, I was baptized, he said. However, there were occasions when white people stood up for him and other black Marines, Brown said. He remembered once being packed like sardines in a train car en route to North Carolina with 80 other black Marines. When the conductor came through, Brown said they could see the car ahead of them was empty except for a lone white woman. We moved into the car. The conductor tried to get us to go back, and we wouldn't do it. He said the conductor called military police when he arrived in Richmond and told him to arrest us. The two military officers looked at the conductor and laughed. On another trip, Brown said several white Marines helped commandeer a city bus and drove him and several other black Marines back to camp when they discovered white bus drivers wouldn't stop to pick them up. I never forget a big white Marine from Texas told me, "You little SOB, you sit up there with me and we're going to take this bus." Brown recalled, that was the one time the bus drivers sat in the back of the bus. Although other Montford Point Marines would go on to fight in some of the bloodiest battles of the Pacific, including two at Jima, Saipan, and Okinawa, they were never fully recognized for their service. 13 Montford Pointers were lost in World War II. After the war, most were discharged. 70 years later, they said their band of brothers trained them well, and to this day, they stand tall with chin in and chest out. Quote unquote, years later, we still have a feeling of pride, Britton said. Hill, who retired in 1987 as the fleet manager for the Citizens and Southern Bank, said, receiving Congressional's highest civilian honor is proof, quote unquote, we can do whatever we have in our hearts to do. Fred Coates, the president of Montford Point Marines Association at Chapter 5 said few people had heard of the Montfort Pointers when he entered the Corps in 1976, even among Marines. "Quote unquote, they are the pioneers who paved the way for me and other blacks to become part of one of the finest forces in the world," he said. "I stand on their shoulders." For years, Brown, a retired federal law enforcement officer and ordained elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, said he envied the recognition of the Buffalo Soldiers and Tuskegee Airmen. Now he said, "I'm pretty happy." Britain, a former U.S. ambassador to Barbados and Grenada, said the most gratifying part of the renewed interest in the Montfort Point Marines was the hearty welcome they received last summer from Commandant Amos. "To me," quote unquote, he said, "it was the final evidence of true acceptance of all black Marines into the Marine Corps." So that was the article. That was the article, and that was the story. So I wanted to share that with you guys. A bit long, I know, my bad. But I do kind of think low-key is sort of a piece of African American history that is often overlooked, sort of like Hidden Figures, right? Just another hidden figure within history, right? Also, something else that was mentioned, not really anything major, but a bit funny though. When my grandfather had told me, like when he first had arrived at the camp, like the black Marines kind of were looking at him a bit weird, as if like, I think they even said like, "What are you doing here?" Because I think when they saw him, they didn't think he was black. So it's like, what are you doing here, right? So yeah, I kind of thought that was a bit funny too. Um, but yeah, as I said, this is my father's father, right? Um, yeah. And my father is also a Marine too, by the way. But yeah, I just wanted to share that with you. I guess a little piece of Black history, but also a piece of, my family history with you guys. And I hope you, enjoyed it. And I hope it didn't bore you too much. But thank you very much for watching. Please, please, please feel free to comment. Feel free to let me know what you guys think. Until the next video, adios and goodbye for now.